Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. I am your host, as usual, Liam, or at the FSA Tweets on Twitter, and today I am alone. I am going to be running solo for this podcast, but that is no problem for you. All you have to do is listen, and I'll take you through everything you need to know. As the title suggests, this is Championship Week, so we have a lot to cover. We'll dive right in, but first, I wanted to say something around Damar Hamlin. As far as I'm sure a lot of people will have heard or seen or whatever the case may be, he unfortunately suffered a cardiac arrest on the field during the Monday Night Football game when he was trying to tackle T. Higgins on a reception there. So they luckily were able to start his heart again on the field, and he is in critical condition in hospital. So all thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. We wish him a speedy recovery. But that game, the NFL has confirmed that it is not being played for week 17 or before the week 18 slate of games. And there's no further information on that. So I'll cover a fantasy side a bit later on around that, but that's the most important thing, is he seems to be okay at this point. But let's dive right into the show, because there's no smooth transition for that whatsoever. So we'll just go straight into the highest scorers of the week. Start off at quarterback, we have Tom Brady, 37.7 points. He was our quarterback 1 on the week. Then Daniel Jones, QB2, and Jarrett Stidham with a 26-point performance came in at QB3. Quite surprising there from Jarrett Stidham to actually be a QB3 on the week. I don't think many had much hope for him to be any good. He might have been average, but he blew everyone's expectations out of the water. It does help when you've got the top wide receiver in the game in Davante Adams on your team, but he still had to get the ball there, and he blew the socks off. Moving over to Daniel Jones, though, QB2 on the week. He ran for 2 touchdowns. He threw 2 more. He only threw for 177 yards, which isn't a lot. He's not been throwing for a lot. He's thrown for a few 300-yard games, but 177 yards this week through the air. I personally think that this secures him a starting role next year. I don't know whether it's for the Giants, though. I think the Giants have seen enough and want to move on. I think Daniel Jones has secured himself a 2 to 3 year deal, maybe with an out in it at some point after 2 years. I just think that what he's shown this year is enough growth for him to move on to another team and be their starter. Moving over to running backs, we've got Austin Eckler, 32.1 points, running back 1 this week. And then Christian McCaffrey, 31.3, running back 2. And then DeAndre Swift, running back 3 there. So I'll start with DeAndre Swift, as that was the last one we mentioned. I mean, earlier in the season, you could quote me talking to a few people saying, is DeAndre Swift ever going to get back to the value of the off-season? I don't think so still. I don't think he's quite there, but this could be seen as a sell-high window for Swift. You could also sell high next week once he's had another big week, because he's going against my Packers, and we're awful against the run. One thing that could be seen from this is they still value him enough to give him the ball in these situations. But my reason for selling previously in the season, or trying to sell as soon as he recoups that value, is because of the injuries, and we're never going to be able to predict injuries, but he just doesn't stay healthy. And we've seen guys like Joe Mixon all of a sudden become more healthy, and yet with Swift, I like the player, I like the talent. I just think that he might be a bit of a sell high candidate now. Um, if anyone is trying to buy, maybe at a little bit lower cost than what they would have thought in the off season. It might be worth exploring an early first for him, see if you can get one of those rookies. Not sure whether you can, but it's definitely worth having a look. Moving over to Austin Eckler, the running back one on the week. Not sure what value you can get for him right now, but he's a 27-year-old running back moving on to be 28 by the start of next season. He's not been given the workhorse role immediately coming out of college. He was a UDFA, so there was a lot of trust that had to be built up, but he still had the workhorse role for 2 to 3 years now. I think it's 3. So we just need to. I think the dynasty community next year, when he turns 28, is going to catch up with that. It might be worth just trying to sell him for a first this year. Mid is probably where I'd go. I don't know whether you get in that, but it's kind of at that point now where he's getting old, and the dynasty community have caught up with that. And his correct value based on his production is never going to be what the actual value is on the market because of his age, even though he's producing at running back 1, running back 2 numbers, and that's running back 1 or 2 overall, not just top 12, top 24. So definitely something to consider if you've got either of those two on your rosters. Wide receivers, I mean, I'm sure you've heard, Mike Evans had a 48.7 point game, so he came in as wide receiver 1, quite obviously. Nearly 50 points is insane. Then you've got Davante Adams, who I've mentioned previously with Jarrett Stidham, nearly 35 points, wide receiver 2, and then Brandon Ayuk at wide receiver 3. We'll move straight back over to Mike Evans, and we'll work our way down the list again. So 207 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's making up for some poor performances since the bye in week 11, but he has really shown up for people in their fantasy teams. I think it's quite difficult to beat Mike Evans' owner when one player has put up equivalent of 3 to 4. So he definitely won a good few championships. You've got Davante Adams, 157 yards, 2 touchdowns, huge game, and he made an incredible catch. I know there's a lot of talk, a lot of speculation around whether it was actually a catch. The NFL ruled it a catch, so I'm going to call it one. Yes, you see the ball move a little, but you don't actually see it touch the ground, so there's no real reason you could call that, or you can call that incompletion, because there's no video evidence there. But in real terms, it probably did touch the ground. But for your fantasy teams, it counted. So it was a good 5 to 6 points, I think it was, about 40, 50 yard reception there. Brandon Ayuk also had a monster game, 9 catches, 101 yards, 1 touchdown. The thing I wanted to highlight with Brandon Ayuk is when he booms, he really booms. He's had a wide receiver 3, a wide receiver 4 game this season. Overall, wide receiver 3 and 4. He's also had incredibly bad games as well. He's been the wide receiver 74 at his lowest when he's played. He's just really that boom bust wide receiver, and I don't know whether I want that on my team. So he's had 10 weeks outside of the top 24 wide receivers. Only 4 of those have been in. But going back to the boom bust thing, 3 of those 4 top 24 wide receiver weeks were top 12 performances. And then 2 of those 3 were actually wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3, as I said. So he is really up and down, but I think I'm moving to sell him a little bit more now that the price has probably gone up on him. About mid first, maybe. I think mid first is probably where I'm comfortable letting him go, and I'm probably thinking that a lot of people would be comfortable with a 106, 107 for him. You might be able to get a little bit more, but I'm not. Personally, I think I'm ready to let go at 106-ish. So move over to the tight ends. Again, this is just PPR. I have tight end premium in here. I don't like it. It's not a no fancy stats or anything like that. So tight end premium, normal tight end, sorry. Tight end 1 was Dalton Schultz with nearly 25 points. Trey McBride, tight end 2, which is an interesting one because I can imagine this is where owners start to get quite excited about the prospect of Trey McBride. But Ertz still has a 10 million, that's Zach Ertz, that is. It still has a 10 million dead cap hit next year if they were to cut him. They only save about 2 million. You aren't replacing someone like Zach Ertz with that 2 million, so they probably aren't going to cut him. Post June 1st, release would then drop that to 6 million this year, but it would make it a 4 million hit next year. So the only way I can see Zach Ertz being moved on from this team would be a post June 1st cut. I still don't think that would be the case. So I think it's possible, but it's improbable in that situation. So I think Trey McBride is probably going to still have another year behind Ertz before that transition is made. If you can buy low in the off season when that Ertz kind of situation has been resolved a little bit more and people come to the realization that Ertz will probably be there next year, and you can buy Trey McBride on the cheap, ready for the 2024 season, that might be a move you could make. But moving over to tight end 3, that was Mark Andrews at 19 points there. There's not much significant news, obviously. I mentioned at the top Damar Hamlin. So the one thing I wanted to go through on that fantasy purposes is because that game got cancelled, there's a lot of finals, a lot of important situations in fantasy world. Obviously, the Damar Hamlin situation is the most important thing here, but we also play fantasy and it is affecting fantasy. So as a commissioner, there's been a bit of communication around that in all of my leagues that I run. The way that I'm handling this is mostly for the championship game. You can roll this out to other games that have importance, like if you have a constellation bracket that is awarding an extra pick, so say an extra first, an extra second to the winner, or whatever that situation may be. If there is another important matchup, you can offer this out to them. Personally, I'm just keeping it to the championship and those other important matchups. The rest of them, like just someone battling out for the 11th place or whatever, I'm not really concerned about. So in terms of commissioner, the way that I'm handling it as a commissioner would be I'm giving the option of those two that are in the final or whatever important matchup it may be to choose out of these 3 options as a combined duo. If they can agree, then you go with whichever option. If they can't agree, I'll explain that a bit later. So option 1 is apply the Bengals-Bills game to the current final score once the game has been played. The reason I put that in there is they may want that, whatever that situation would have been in week 17, to finally play out if it does end up getting played, that game does. Option 2 is apply the week 18 scores to the week 7 or the week 18 scores for those that were unresolved. So guys like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Josh Allen, etc. You apply whatever score they get in week 18 to their week 17 matchups, and then you use that score to determine the final winner. That's personally my least favorite, but it's always good to give those options, especially if both agree on one of whichever one it is. And then the third and final option is the teams can agree to share the final, the championship, whatever that important situation is. if it is a situation where the consolation bracket or whatever wins an extra pick, you can offer an extra pick to both of the teams. Whatever that situation is, you can always bend the rules a little bit for that, I suppose. But where there's money involved in that, it might be worth saying you both become the winner and therefore you share the first and second pot, first and second place pot overall. Again, this is just suggestion. You don't have to go with what I'm saying. You can go with whatever solution you find fit. But I've found this is probably going to be the fairest way I've thought of. And then the way that I'd resolve this if the two parties don't settle or they don't agree, is you would be forced into option one, which is where you apply the Bengals Bills game whenever it is played onto the Week 17 scores. If that doesn't happen, then they immediately go to option three, which is where they share whatever the winnings are. What you share, whatever the title is, whatever they've won, they both get equal part in that. So that's just an update, I suppose. I don't really know, obviously, how to bring this across. That's just just to give you a little bit of a heads up and some food for thought, I suppose. And for that, I would also recommend only leaving it to the two involved in the matchup, not the whole league, because it doesn't affect the whole league. It only affects those two that are in it. Again, consolation bracket where you get an extra pick may involve the whole league, but I still would only recommend those two and make sure the commissioner, i.e. yourself in most situations, is actually happy with that solution. Let's move on from that news. So the Dynasty stock market is next up. We've got the risers and the fallers. So start the risers as usual. Najee Harris is one that I picked out immediately. He had a good game this week. Good game. He had a brilliant game. He was a top 12 running back. He had 111 yards rushing this week. He had 24 touches overall. He had that touchdown catch to win the game. He had a good week. But the thing that I wanted to highlight is over the past 4 weeks, he has been the running back 8 overall. And because that does dip into the week 14 buys, decided to bring in points per games. In points per game, he's running back 10 overall in that time frame. So he has started to creep back up quite quietly. I don't think many people, apart from this week, have really noticed that creep up. So it's definitely something to think about. It might be a little sneaky buy low window before people start to think about it, but that's something to consider. And then my other riser is Tyler Algier. Now, this is a guy that I was kind of middling with during the rookie draft. I quite liked him where he was going, but I didn't overall like the talent. I didn't think that he was ever going to be much more than maybe a handcuff, and that was kind of like a Tony Pollard without the explosion. Like Tony Pollard without knowing what this season held. So when you look at Tyler Algier, he was a top 12 running back for the 3rd week in a row. He was a running back 7 overall over the past 3 weeks, running back 8 when you bring in points per game in the same time frame, so over the past 3 weeks. So that's coming out of his bye week. The thing that I wanted to kind of highlight around Tyler Algier is that Cordero Patterson has an out after this year. Doesn't mean that the Falcons are going to take it. They only save about $2 million, but it's something to consider because you could always bring in a rookie running back. Tyler Algier takes that step up and becomes the running back 1A or 1. Then your rookie running back is your running back 2 or 1B. and you end up getting that Tyler Algier getting some more touches to start the season, and then you can sell, or you can even sell if they do move on from Patterson in the off season before the rookie draft happens. If you think that Tyler Algier is going to have added competition, the other side to that is Tyler Algier is a fourth round pick. So does that mean that they're going to trust him enough? That's to be seen. But I do think that Tyler Algier has been, again, a sneaky riser that not many people have seen. I mean, he had a brilliant game last week. He had a big game this week. But again, just something to kind of think about if you are moving off some of the other guys. Maybe you could have these guys thrown in as not a throw-in because they're worth more than that, but maybe added to the deal. The faller I've chosen for this week is Miles Sanders. Without Hurts, he's been pretty poor. I think that's quite obvious, but I don't think people realise how poor he has been. He had 12 rushes for 61 yards this week. That average isn't too bad. But when you consider that he's not been a top 36 running back over any of the past 3 weeks, the highest was running back 38, which was not this week just gone, would have been week 16. And as he's coming up to free agency, I don't think that he's going to be in a situation better than he's in now. I think that he's going to be going into some sort of, I'm trying to think of one, like a Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert situation where it's a proper 1A, 1B, or a Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon situation. It's quite an unknown for Miles Sanders, and he's having a poor end to the season. That could obviously change going into the playoffs. Maybe in the playoffs he has a Cam Akers style end to the season and then booms and becomes a premier free agent, I suppose. I don't know. But right now, with how he is, I think Miles Sanders is quietly losing value, and I don't think people have clocked on quite enough to that right now. Then the last thing I've got for you listeners, it is a shorter episode this week because I'm on my own and I'm flying through my show sheet. Player of the week. So I've chosen AJ Dillon. Surprise, surprise. But it's not necessarily this week that I wanted to speak about. He had 12 rushes for 41 yards. The average isn't brilliant. It's under 4 yards per carry. But he had a touchdown, which saved his week, got him up to about 10 points. He had one target, no receptions. So not a brilliant week, but not going to cost you a whole lot. He still scored about 10 PPR points. The thing that I wanted to bring up was over the past 5 weeks or the 5 games that he's played, so over the past 6 weeks, he had a week 14 bye, he was a top 24 running back in each of those weeks. He's scored 6 touchdowns in that span. So he has had one a week, and that's not an average. He has had at least one every week in that span. But he's also been incredible down the stretch for a lot of people trying to make the playoffs or getting into those fancy playoffs. So he's someone that had somewhat of a poor start or a poor middle. He's had some boom weeks and he's kind of dropped off a little bit, but he's been good when he's got on the field. I'm not expecting him to be a top 5 running back. I don't think that's his ceiling. Any given week, yes, but over the season, no, I don't think that running back 5 is in his range of outcomes. I think that he can be that steady running back 3 flex option. That flex option that can also get into those incredible games once every so often. So AJ Dillon is my player of the week just for his historic matchup, his historic scores rather than anything else. Before I drop off, there's one or a few things that I wanted to mention. So congratulations to anyone that has won a championship this week or still in limbo, but is basically guaranteed to win one, whatever that situation is. But congratulations to everyone for making it through another season. This is where Dynasty really starts. It's the off season. There's a lot of rookie prep that a lot of people are going to be doing. So make sure you check that out on Twitter, Reddit, wherever you go for your information on YouTube, whatever. Make sure you check every source available because everyone's going to have different evaluations. I'm going to have different evaluations to the next. It's always going to happen. So always do enough research to make your own opinion, but obviously we're always here to try and help with that. Then there's plenty of things coming for the 5 Yard Dynasty off season. I'm going to be having many guests on. It's not going to be me solo every week. I will be having a guest on from now on, as 5 Yard Dynasty does during the off season, every off season. I'll be doing an end of season review over the next few weeks. So make sure you stay tuned for that over the next few weeks. And until next time, guys, stay safe, and we'll see you then.